First of all, I would like to give a warm welcome to all of the people who are here for the first 10 seconds of the video to leave a dislike and an angry response calling me a communist before even watching it. And goodbye. All right, now that that's out of the way, comrades, working men and working women, collective farmers, brothers and sisters, guerrillas, we must fight for the socialist revolution. Fight to the end until the complete victory of the proletariat and the overthrow of the international bourgeoisie. Long live the worldwide social... Seriously, people. You do not have to join the Red Army to recognize that capitalism has some problems. You can even love it and realize this. But the truth is, one could create the greatest system in the universe, but as soon as you insert humans, said system will have issues. Check out the Garden of Eden. We suck. Especially when we were given the freedom to suck. I'm not sure when exactly this Republican worship of capitalism began, but it is a problem and it needs to stop. Capitalism is just a system of economics. It is not a god, it's not a moral system, and it's not going to save us. And in fact, in its current highly toxic form, has arguably been the downfall of both traditionalism and conservatism in many ways. And coincidentally is the most powerful weapon currently used by radical socialist activists who seemingly have given up the class war in favor of winning the culture war hand in hand with big corporations. So let's jump right into it and go through the three main problems I have here and why. 1. The amount of power corporations have is too damn high. I have a lot in common with libertarians. I ran for the Libertarian Party. I generally want to be left alone and not have the foot of the state constantly on my throat. However, where I tend to part ways with my libertarian friends is I think there are significantly more threats to our freedoms than just the state, such as the many violent, non-government authoritarian criminals and foreign terrorist groups that exist. All people I don't particularly want entering my country or running around freely. Libertarians will often disagree with me and respond by saying, sure, Lauren, violent people exist, but they are just not as big a threat as the all-powerful state is to our freedoms. Therefore, no matter the potential benefits of the state in stopping or reducing other evils, it must be abolished or at least severely reduced, because they are the bigger problem, which fair enough. Deal with the greatest threat to freedoms first. The only problem here, though, is that the government is no longer the 800-pound gorilla. It's more like an organ grinder's monkey dancing to corporate music. Western governments are largely controlled by corporate lobbying pressure, campaign donations, and now even censorship of politicians we once would have thought were more powerful than said corporations. And the worst part about the corporations having this power is we didn't elect them. And no, we didn't vote for them with our dollar either. I'm sure a lot of us would much rather go to our local shops and hire our neighbors for jobs over some faceless, nameless corporation, but unfortunately it's becoming near impossible to compete with global monopolies utilizing slave labor to drive down prices while we have to adhere to reasonable local labor laws. Not to mention all the government grants, tax cuts, and favoritism for big business elites. It is simply not possible to compete, which is tragic for hardworking small businesses and medium businesses, which I, and I'm sure many of you, really support. Now, I know what you're thinking. I know what you are all thinking. Lauren, this is not real capitalism you are talking about. This is crony capitalism. And you'd be absolutely right. But here's the kicker. Real capitalism has never been tried. Just like how real communism has never been tried. Both of these theories and systems on a large scale are ahistorical constructs. We have never lived in a world where millions of people have had to share with each other the way a family does. And we have never lived in a world where everyone buys and sells from each other with no restrictions or aggression from anyone else. So if we want to deal with reality, what we have to examine is how capitalism has actually worked in history. And to my libertarians, a little side note, if you need to mentally put the word crony in front of capitalism for the rest of this talk to get through it, that's perfectly fine. Like I said, You're not wrong, but I'm speaking to the system in place today that Republicans often defend as capitalism. And history tells us that this system can absolutely lead to brutal, authoritarian, and freedom-threatening results, as it is quickly doing so today. Corporations have the power to politically manipulate populations, to deny us our speech, and even to control our thoughts and feelings through algorithms. That is terrifying. And despite this, you still have Republicans out here defending it as just a private company. And another peep you may hear from them in defense of our corporate overlords is, well, at least they can't throw you in jail. At least they won't put you against a firing wall or start wars. Yeah, sorry, that just doesn't quite line up with history either. I could do a whole video on private war profiteering. And massive companies and corporations like the Dutch East India Company not only kept and sold slaves, but had private militaries larger than entire countries' militaries, and eventually became so powerful they could invade and become the acting government in areas in which they had business interests. To pretend that if we just abolished the government, none of these corporations would ever even think to oppress us, to fill that power vacuum and take away our liberties, is madness. In fact, there is already legislation being proposed to allow Nevada tech companies to form their own governments and cities. So people, if you are skeptical of and you don't like big government, you really should be just as worried about big corporations, because they don't want to uphold systems which made them wealthy, as those very systems may allow for their replacement and failure. And thus, they want to become your government and eliminate competition and question. And I fear that these mega corporations are getting very close to that. So instead of daddy government on our throats, we'll just have, Google Soldiers TM putting us up against firing walls for illegally downloading Gab or Parler to their devices and sharing our Netflix account with more than 10 friends. But let's move on, because this second one is a far more important point, and that is capitalism's destruction of community and culture. I often see many on the right lamenting the loss of old traditional architecture, community, family, and art, and yet at the same time proposing capitalism as a solution. It's not. Not even a little bit. Capitalism has no incentive to preserve our culture or communities, and in fact, I'd argue, has negatively impacted families. I think where this confusion comes in is some people observe that Marxism works in opposition to capitalism and to deconstruct the nuclear family, and assume, therefore, capitalism must be working to oppose Marxism and to support the family. But capitalism is not Marxism's counter. It came about before Marxism and is therefore indifferent to it. It's simply an alternate system. And while that system can certainly bolster some people's family lives and wealth and material goods, capitalism only moderates for the markets and not for the souls and well-being of its workers. There is a reason defenders of capitalism talk about how people can't eat in communist societies, because capitalism is really, really good at creating surpluses of goods for physical needs. But does it serve, your safety needs? Not really. Your financial security can be wiped away any minute by the stock market. Does it serve needs relating to love and belonging? No, because having a wife or a husband, and definitely kids, is a drain on your productivity and resources. And anyway, in this culture, apparently it's irrational to limit yourself to just one person. Might as well just use Tinder and count yourself lucky to live in a free society, you prude. Does it serve needs related to esteem? Does anyone feel esteemed in an assembly line or in a job where their boss treats them like they should be grateful the company has room in the budget for free coffee? Does it serve needs relating to self-actualization? You try self-actualizing in a gig economy or in a world where you can lose your job the instant you self-actualize in a way that Twitter doesn't like. Also, on a side note, Marxism may have told women that being wives and mothers was shameful, but it was capitalism that broadcast that message so that all of those women would enter the workforce and drive down the wages of their husbands and sons. Seriously, can we really say that it's all just government systems that have ruined our happiness? Or perhaps could some of us admit our work life, addiction to media, obsession with pursuing the next shiny product, the constant demands that we buy things to look a certain way, feel a certain way, watch this, buy that, play that, drink this, eat that? Could it perhaps be this mass consumerism and work-life imbalance that has also ripped us from our family, community, and loved ones, and ourselves, in many ways as well. What Hannah Arendt called the vita activa, a state where we must always be busy, never present, and always consuming. It's just soul-destroying. And even if we move on to other factors leading to cultural decay, such as mass immigration with no assimilation, that too has largely been pushed and supported by corporations looking for cheap labor. As for old architecture, the utility of a building being nice relative to its price just doesn't add up. And don't tell me there's not a demand for beautiful buildings when people are flying halfway across the world just to take pictures with them. The problem is that the demand clearly doesn't lead to enough profit. Visual joy of the citizenry in daily life is not a business. This is in large part why the left have won the culture war. They didn't care that their arts degrees weren't particularly profitable, they just wanted to create art. And sure, I'm conceding ground to progressives in some regard, but I'm also not going to sit here and pretend that you can eat an art degree or that it was the arts that doubled our average lifespan. That was absolutely innovation pushed by commercial interests and capitalism. But the question still arises, what is the point of a long lifespan if increasingly people aren't wanting to live said life? Ultimately, we cannot understate how consumerism makes surviving insultingly easy, but we must also acknowledge it makes living insultingly hard. Now, the last one here, number 3. Capitalism is indifferent to morality. Capitalism is not a conservative view of the world. It's not a political view at all, really. It's simply a tool which sways towards the highest bidder. If you live in a culture that is deeply sickened, the products that are both created and sold will sicken with it. They won't save it. They won't pull you out of your moral darkness. Capitalism just amplifies what we as humans desire in our hearts, which is why it has done very wonderful things worthy of praise. But if you are a nation that has lost morality, if you are a nation that has lost God, capitalism just becomes the devil's playground. Go ahead, ignore your family and friends so you can work to fund your alcoholism, spend all night feeding your porn addiction and buying your way past a girl's modesty, pay for followers to feed your narcissism, why don't you? And go ahead, consume the cheapest product provided by men and women only held to their desks by the factory suicide nets preventing them from jumping to their own death. I'm sorry, but there is a reason that even the most stringent conservatives like Sir Roger Scruton often describe themselves as reluctant capitalists. Because modern capitalism is a deeply sick system, and progressives are not wrong to call that out. If you can't acknowledge where your opponents are correct, you cannot argue with them on where they are wrong. You can't even begin to explain to them that this is crony capitalism. You can't even begin to argue that it's a user issue and application rather than the system itself, without acknowledging that there is an issue in the first place. Truth is not found in political absolutes. It's not found in platitudes either. As one of my most respected mentors and professor, Ron Dart, always reminds me, truth is often found in the tension. That is to say, not absolutes, nor even the center, but constantly questioning and challenging ourselves and our beliefs. And as I mentioned at the start of this video, some of you may be itching to call me a socialist for publishing this, but consider that you're watching this video on YouTube. Literally any minute, with no warning, YouTube could alter its terms of service to include a provision that lets them ban this video, and then do it. How does this make them any better than countries who censor political dissidents? My banning from the UK cut me off from speaking face-to-face with 68 million people potentially, and even if I had a primetime slot at the BBC and attracted the entire viewership of the UK, I still wouldn't get a fraction of the influence and reach that's available on YouTube. YouTube gets 8.6 billion monthly visits worldwide, literally more engagement than there are people on planet Earth. Their daily views are in the billions, and YouTube can cut you off from that audience anytime it likes, for any reason, with no warning or explanation. And because of the power of its lobbying, there is currently no chance to fix that problem. And if you complain about that massive, unaccountable, super governmental power over worldwide speech, you get accused of supporting literal centralized planning of all resources in society by some Republicans, as if there is no middle ground between, hey, I think corporations have gone a bit far, and submitting yourself to Big Brother. Which is why I say this to any in my audience currently itching to call me a socialist. You keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. Now, do I have a solution for this? Great question. No, I got nothing. Sorry, guys. But to be fair, this is probably why we've let things get so whack. Because all of our solutions to these problems with capitalism throughout history have created much bigger problems for us than the initial one we were trying to solve, including the death and torment of millions. So I guess I can see why people are a bit hesitant to brainstorm on this one, but I would rather honestly speak about the flaws in capitalism with my head held high than pretend it's perfect by burying my head in the sand, I guess. And we can't really ignore these problems forever, as the more we pretend they don't exist, the more people will turn to radical solutions rather than reasonable healing. But yeah, I just wanted to start a conversation there, and I'm glad I got that off my chest, comrades. And for those of you who really disagreed with me and stuck around to the end of this video, really respect that and appreciate that. And to those of you who enjoyed all of this video and agree with me, please consider liking and sharing it and checking out my subscribe star in the link below. Anyways, thank you again for watching this video, and I will see you all next time.